Hi, good morning. I'm Carly. I'm from Interactive Ontario. We're hosting this event today as part of our iON series. Today we'll be talking about preparing for trade events and export. So thank you for joining us, whether you're here in person or watching online on the live stream. I'd like to thank our presenting partner for the series, the Canada Media Fund, and our event partner, Royal Bank of Canada, and as well our venue partner today, Snowden Studios, for hosting us here. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to our presenters today, Mohammad and Wes from Magmic.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the talk. My name is Mohammad, the president and COO of Magmic. We've been working in the mobile industry since 2002, and myself since 2007. Creating and developing a lot of games. I've been to a lot of trade shows myself, and what I'm going to try to do today is give you a little bit of tips and tricks from my own experiences, what to do and what not to do around trade shows. And I have here with me Wes Tam.
Hey guys, I'm Wes Tam. I'm the director of client development at Magmic. I've had 15 years of gaming experience, and over those years I've done a lot of different trade shows, demoed a lot of products to co-production partners, to consumers. So looking forward to sharing some of those experiences and best practices with you guys today.
So I'll be starting with some of my, anecdotal advice. But first, a little bit about Magmic. We're an award-winning publisher, been in the industry since 2002. We're located in Ottawa, Canada. We do a lot of casual card and board games right now. We've been done a whole bunch of different kind of types of games over the years. We develop exclusively for mobile. We do branded titles, and current partners include Hasbro, Mattel, and Rubik's, with a lot of previous branded partners as well. It's been quite an exciting time for us. All right, so trade shows. If you work in the digital media industry, you will realize that there are a lot of different trade shows. Personally, I've been to maybe about 20 different kinds, but there could be close to about 50, happening a year all over the place. So it's really important for you guys to choose the right trade show. What are your business goals? From your business goals, I think then you can kind of narrow it down to what conferences are actually good for you. And from there, look at budgets. Unfortunately, San Francisco, we have a lot of trade shows there, but it's really expensive right now. So, sometimes budget can be a factor in what trade shows to go, because a lot of shows are actually repeated in different cities. Once you have your plan for your trade shows, well, then you gotta plan your collateral. What are you actually gonna send over there? Because your collateral, you need to get it early. It's my second piece of advice. It can be really expensive, actually, if you're marketing collateral. If you're running a booth, you're probably going to be looking at a whole bunch of different collateral than if you were just going to a conference for business development. So you want to plan ahead and budget. Word of advice is, if you are running any kind of booth and you are sending equipment down to a conference, make sure you call ahead and plan ahead, because a lot of these events have significant costs for receiving materials. So you might want to kind of consider, should I send it to the trade show? Should I send it to my hotel? Should I take it with me? In fact, I've seen a lot of people actually buy equipment when they land in the city, because that's the cheapest option than actually shipping it from here with all of the receiving costs. So make sure you plan all of that stuff early. Also as well, if you're doing a show in Asia, you're seeking Asian publishing, you probably want to localize your collateral so that you have business cards in Mandarin, etc. So do plan ahead. That's my second piece of advice. Have a meeting strategy. It's really difficult to kind of have focus sometimes at these events. So what I really recommend is, you take some time before your event. You look at your business objectives. Who are the people you'd want to meet, and what are the companies you'd like to meet? Plan ahead, write some information about them. What I've done in the past is I'll look at people and companies and I'll write small bios, and I'll kind of go to the conference armed with this. Sometimes when you're talking to somebody and you drop a little bit of personal information, it creates that human connection, and I find I have a lot more success with that. So, plan what you want to do and your objectives there, and try to, execute on them a little bit early, because you really need to also book your meetings in advance. That's my second, my next takeaway. Be strategic with your time. Don't just take bunch of meetings. Quality over quantity is important. Try and find the people you want to meet. Make sure you email them out 4 to 6 weeks out. Even if it's just setting a TBD, we're going to meet at the conference, so let's connect 2 weeks closer. I think it's a good strategy to always reach out to the people you want early. There's a lot. Key people are usually booked out, very early on. 2+ weeks is probably good. By then, 2 weeks before the show, most people are full with their schedules, so you do want to get on that early. One thing I found very useful is I'll usually reserve a block of time as well for impromptu meetings. So if you meet somebody there who's very interesting and maybe you couldn't reach by email, you still have some time to actually talk with them. And of course, have your demo at hand at all times. The early on in the show is better. I usually find that I get the best out of a trade show in the beginning versus at the end, when people are usually tired or have gone home. My last piece of advice is attend the parties. A lot of the trade shows have after hours, after kind of evening events and mixers. I find those are very, very useful as well. Because during your course of the day, you'll meet people that you tend to kind of either be in business with or they're potential to be business with, but you won't necessarily meet people in the industry that you aren't necessarily going to work with. But there may be some tangential kind of connections. So I find like going to the parties and events is a great way to meet new people in the industry. And one there, I said, don't demo your build, because you want to create that human connection between you and somebody, and I think that goes a very long way in this at trade shows and events. Most people like to do business with people that they have some sort of human connection with, so I find that's kind of very important to focus on. And then lastly, for these trade shows, which is actually quite important for us as Canadian companies, is we have a lot of support services around attending trade shows and also exporting product. So if you're a company that sells, video games or sells digital media, then you have actually access to a lot of the export funding that the government provides. The federal government does a CAN export, and they'll cover 50% of your costs, up to $100,000. So that's quite a lot of money. Ontario Export Market Access also is another program that Ontario, the provincial government, provides for companies that export. So if you sell any kind of digital, film, software overseas, you're eligible for these. There are some restrictions around, revenue and whatnot, so you should check them out. The Ontario Export Manager Program, one that we use quite a lot is the OMDC Global Market Development Program. That's a good program. They'll actually fund 50% up to $15,000 a year for attending conferences and shows, and they'll even pay for supporting materials and collateral. And then of course the CMF marketing promotion, which you can access through the Canada Media Fund, is quite useful. One other great tool we've used to our advantage is using the actual consular services available. So we have through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Canadian Trade Commissioners, and these are people who are posted at embassies all around the world, and it is their job to connect Canadian companies with foreign companies. So if you're looking to export to Korea, for example, you want a game there, you have trade commissioners in Korea who are, know the local publishers and can help you set up meetings. So if you don't know people, they can connect you. And Ontario actually also has its own version of the trade commissioners through the Ontario Ministry of International Trade. So there are chances to actually kind of double dip into this. I find those are great programs. The Canadian government provides a lot of support for us. We're very lucky in that, very unique in the world, because not many countries do that. So it is basically free money if you qualify. So do check those programs out, and do take use of the trade commissioners, because we do pay for them through our taxes. And so I'm going to start passing off here to West Ham. That was my anecdotal advice on conferences, and Wes will actually talk about how to prep your demos and games for a really good, productive demo while at these events.
Oh, thanks, Mo. I think there's one more slide for you. Booths?
Sorry, there's one more slide for me. Running booths, my last piece of advice, because that is actually quite a big one for some companies. Running booths, it's been hit or miss for me personally. I find if you're a game publisher, for example, and you have a new game coming out, it's maybe a good idea to run a booth at a B2C event like E3, Gamescom, or any of the PAX events. If you're at a B2B conference, I personally wouldn't recommend running a booth unless you're a service provider providing services to game developers, so not a vendor. I think those events, you're better off served if you're actually out there. The thing with a booth is, once you have a booth, you're at the booth, so you have no kind of ability to go and actually meet people. You're dependent on people coming to you. So it is, and it also can be very expensive. So do consider depending on your business goals, when is it a good time to actually use a booth or not. And that is, now I shall pass to Wes for real this time.
Thanks, Mo. There's the slide thing. Okay, cool. So, hey, everybody. Let's talk about the most exciting part of going to trade shows, and that's demoing, all that hard work that you guys have worked on, on those long hours. Now it's time to show that stuff off. So in the next few slides, I'm going to go in depth into some practices and processes that I've adopted for the productions that I've worked on. These things have kind of really worked for me over the years. So I'll go into some specific examples of some of the games that I've actually demoed and some of the specific functionality that we've implemented into those games, as well as into our upcoming release of the Phase 10 refresh product that we're working on. So I'll give you guys a quick demonstration of those, of some really specific functionality that can enable us to demo these great products. Cool. So from my experience, it's really important to script and tailor your demo to the audience you're trying to reach. Is the audience stakeholders? Are they distribution partners? What team are they on in that organization? Are they the brand team? Are they managers? Are they stakeholders? Maybe they're press you're dealing with. So just make sure you know your audience, understand who they are, what your objectives are, what they're looking for in your build, and how and understand how you're going to engage them. Figure out what your business goals are, and work these into your deadlines, your objectives, your budgets, and make sure you scope around this, right? So that there's no hidden costs, in your production. So crunch time is really normalized throughout the production, right? So you're not blindsided by all this additional work that go into building these demos, because they are a lot of work. Recently, we demonstrated a build that was designed for our co-production partner, and specifically we were targeting their brand team. Our game had some features that the producers with our partner were very on board with. They were cool with it, but the brand team was, they weren't quite sure about this functionality and if it best represented what they were trying to achieve and their goals. So we really decided to work in specific messaging in a demo that we presented to them. So the goal of this first milestone was to really sell the brand team on these specific features. So we really streamlined and crafted a story that would really kind of speak to those guys and really highlight those features to them. We shifted the content around in our build and emphasize these, and use the content to help emphasize some of these features and tell that story to them. And then certain features that weren't ready or that would detract from this build were ultimately stripped out, right? We just didn't want to derail things potentially. And then a few years ago on the Star Wars Rebels project I was working on, I worked on a booth at Star Wars Celebration down in LA, demoing the game to consumers. For that, we planned well in advance a specific demo that would showcase the game for the consumers. The game had a really long onboarding process. The first-time user experience was well over an hour in that game. In the normal progression of the game, the player would have graduated to the different functionalities and playable characters over an hour or so. In this demo, obviously, in a playable demo at a trade show, you don't really have that attention span. Somebody's not going to sit at your booth or sit over your shoulder and look at your game for an hour, right? That's just not effective. So we had to select the features that we wanted to highlight and really streamline the build down to a 2 to 5 minute demo. So the way we worked this was because we had less features, like that actually shortened the length of our first-time user experience, and we can focus, just kind of onboarding to some basic mechanics for the user to get around in, so like navigation and movement. And then on top of that, we also pulled some things, that were introduced to the player later on in the game, things like the town area in the game. This was a major component to the sandbox aspect of the game, but it didn't open up until the mid-game. So in this demo, we decided to pull that forward and really highlight that as part of the build because that was the main selling point of the game. Okay, so next slide. Is it this one? Oh, there we go. Cool. So it's also important to formalize the onboarding process with people giving your demo. You don't assume that they know, or you cannot assume that they know the specific ins and outs of the features of the game, especially if you're in a more segmented company. You should onboard them well ahead of the event. Pull them into meetings, present the content to them directly, take them out to lunch, do whatever it takes to make sure that they know what the coolest features in the game are, how to actuate the stuff inside the game, and how to present it. Provide documentation that highlight key moments to them, right? So like a sizzle reel document that really shows and exhibits a list of all the cool things in the game and how they can access it. Produce easy to access documentation that includes walkthroughs and cheats, because these things are, often the demoers are under pressure to really manipulate the game to get it into a specific state so that they can show a particular feature of the game, right? So the easier you make this, the more likely they are able to exhibit this feature. Cool. And then make sure the build is gotten to the demo, the demoers well in advance of the trade show, right? So make sure they are playing the build and experiencing the game and are comfortable with it, right? And if you're tight on deadlines and timing, or they're busy or everyone's busy, then just make sure they get it before they jump on that plane, right? Because that plane ride is a great opportunity for the demoer to become familiar with the build. And then finally, see here. But even better, you can involve those demoers in your milestone planning, in your sprint planning, right? Get them on board early. That way, it doesn't just get them to buy into the features that you're trying to implement, but they can help plan that out, and it onboards them in a much better capacity. Okay. So after all is said and done, it's also important to plan for contingency. You can't trust the Wi-Fi at a conference. There's a ton of people there. It can be very flaky. So make sure you have your own data connection via your mobile provider, or that your game works in an offline context. This is very important for mobile games because a lot of mobile games require connectivity. When we were demoing some of our tools to some of our partners, at one point, our development tools, those tools also require network connectivity. So, we didn't have access to the Wi-Fi, and we were in a real-time demo trying to give this demonstration of the tool, and it was trying to pull metadata from from a server, and the tool kept on timing out, and it was a very stressful position, right? So just make sure connectivity is very important, and then make sure you have backup power, especially if you're demoing mobile games. These things drain the power very quickly, right? If you're at the conference all day, right, and you're running, the conference around, you don't have time to go back to the hotel or charging station, right? Make sure you have that extra power because, if you're going to the mixers and if you're presenting, the demo builds at these mixers, right? Like, your battery's going to drain, and then, if you have these really exciting things to show potential clients or customers, right? You don't want to kind of have to worry about that. That's a huge stress point, and I've been there. So, on top of that, keep documentation and gameplay footage. I'd like to break footage up into very small sections, right? Like 15-second clips or so, right? Exhibiting different functionality, right? This way, if your demo breaks down, you can always, at arm's length reach, call this stuff, right? And display the stuff, and it's a nice little backup, right? And it also sometimes supplements, what you're trying to communicate to users. And then finally, schedule key resources to be available at your home office. If something goes wrong, there's always somebody at home base to help you out. If you need a specific asset punched out, right, like there's always somebody there to help you, right? If you're in a different time zone or overseas at a conference, right, just try to convince them to maybe put in some time that aligns with your schedule, right? It could be at home or whatever, but it'd be nice if they are accessible, right? Just in case, right? Because things do go wrong, and sometimes you do. It is very helpful to call somebody back home and have them walk you through something. Cool. Okay, so if there are glaring issues in the build, bugs or cosmetic issues, these can be very annoying, and they can actually detract from your demo. If you're standing over the shoulder, working a booth, or you're demoing a game at one of these mixers, and you're over the shoulder and you're like, hey, that doesn't actually work like that, right? Like you need to just don't worry about that for now, right? Like you're spending more time trying to clarify the specific blemishes in your game, and you're spending less time actually talking about the epic moments and winning them over, right? So you have a very finite time with them, and you don't want to be spending that time, right, justifying and clarifying builds, bugs or glaring issues in the game. So furthermore, the build should be locked down, right? So if there's functionality that will crash the game, or if trigger indeterminate behavior, make sure this stuff is disabled, right? Because somebody's going to click it, right? Like you tell them, don't click that button, right? Don't perform that action, but they're going to do it, right? And that's going to crash your whole build, and then you're going to have to rebuild the whole thing or reboot the whole thing. And then the worst thing is if you do have these builds and then you're communicating this to the user, you're repeating yourself over and over and over again, and this can be very demoralizing to the person that's giving the demo, right? Like if they're spending their time and energy kind of communicating this stuff. Cool. So I'm going to go a little bit more technical here and just kind of go into some of the specific features that really give us the ability to give stronger and more impromptu demos in our games. So I call this random access of game content. So with mobile games, we can demo them anywhere, at any time. In fact, often people expect this. If you're at dinner with a potential partner and you're talking about the game and you're on mobile, they're going to be like, hey, let's see that, right? So, if you're at a networking event, same thing, right? Like people expect to see your build, right? So, it's different on PC and console, but for mobile, it's like as soon as you mention mobile, they want you to bust out your phone and show them the build. So, over the years, I've learned that being able to quickly access, any point in the game or any specific content in the game is a very effective tool in showcasing your build. These conversations are very unscripted, and bringing up something in a timely manner can really, go a long way in creating an impactful and positive experience for that, for that viewer. So, I talk about the stuff. I call it buried content. So this is an example from the Rebels game I worked on, managed a few years ago. There's a really cool moment where the player could trigger a dance party in the game. It played the cantina music, and it was a really fun and cool moment and memorable moment. So this feature was actually very hard to access by the user. So for the user to actually engage or actuate this feature, they would have to rescue a whole series of NPCs into the game and bring them back into the town hub area. There would be a bunch of buildings that they'd have to kind of install into the hub area to be able to facilitate that population of NPCs as well. So there's a chef character that you see on the left. He has to be rescued and brought back to the hub. The chef character gives a random quest that happens at a fairly moderately low probability. So that character needs to be able to activate his quest. When that quest is activated in the world, various ingredients for the recipes are spawned, right? So now the player has to go through those areas and collect those items. Once they've collected those items, then they have to take it back to the chef. And if everything is all good and sound, then we see the dance party. So needless to say, this it was a cool moment, but it was really hard and tedious for the demoers to actually show this. In fact, like we never showed this to anybody like at a conference, even though it was like such a cool moment, right? Like, so how do we expose this buried content? Well, oops, I did that. Oh, you changed it for me. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Okay. So during the production, developers often make use of these features, command line tools, debug menus, authoring workflow tools, scripting systems to help them stride through an application. Right? If I'm an artist and I'm working on a specific aspect of the game and I'm tuning an animation, I'm going to jump to that particular spot right away. So this stuff, those features are designed to really increase workflow. They reduce reflection time, and they really increase and promote iteration, right? So for many projects, these features are already there, right? So you guys probably have a lot of this stuff already built, in your workflows for your developers. So in the previous example, in fact, we actually had some staging areas and some scripts that would auto-populate subsystems to that particular state so that we could actuate the dance party. Cool. So are there ways we could expose this type of functionality in a very easy-to-use, end-user-centric way such that I could give an impromptu demo of this functionality at a trade show at a Starbucks? So, when we're speccing these features, again, as I said, many of these features are exposed to the end user already. But when we're building these features, we're really looking only at the testers, the game designers, the programmers. So when we're building out these use cases, we're not really considering those end user, who may be demoing the system, marketeers, non-technical people that haven't been trained with the workflow or live outside the workflow, right? So. So as such, some of these features can, maybe be hard to use. These developer features can be hard to use. They may be brittle or a little bit clunky. They may not be robust, or they're poorly documented and offer little feedback when they're actually invoked, right? So, so is there a way? And on top of that, these features may be developed in a way that may be very hard to access from a mobile game, right? So something like using Unity's inspector workflow doesn't work to kind of author the game or edit the game state to be able to achieve what you're trying to show. So in our Phase 10 game, in our upcoming Phase 10 refresh, which there we go. Here it is, Phase 10. We've implemented the code in a very malleable form, right? So, features of the game are very data-driven, and the UI flow is very highly decoupled. We can trigger the launch of any screen from any screen. We can trigger the launch to the in-game and configure that in-game, to very specific, tailor-made scenarios. This is done through our debugging and workflow tools that was mentioned in the previous slide. And it gives our developers and artists very short reflection time, as mentioned before, and optimizes iteration, maximizes iterations. So this is exposed through our debug console. As you can see, it's not the most usable from a non-technical person. This can be cryptic or error-prone, and especially hard to input on a mobile phone, right? Like, no, we can't expect anyone to enter that command in on a mobile device, right? Like, let alone a non-technical person, right? That's just not going to work, right? On a console or something like that, maybe it's a little bit better, but but on the mobile, it's not a usable interface. Okay, and then on top of that, like if how do you expect somebody giving a demo in a high pressure real time situation to actually be able to type that in? Okay, so in Phase 10, we use reflection on the client side to auto-generate debugging interfaces, debugging widgets for each debug command that we have. So this system really provides Or this system even provides auto-populating fields, right? Combo boxes and drop-down, based on predefined parameters or predefined possible parameters. The initial intent of this system was to provide, our testers and stakeholders with a more easy-to-use interface where they can, manipulate the state of the game to test and review features. But this also has, the application of allowing our testers to be able to go in and, our demoers to go in and use this, right? So, thanks. Cool. We could still do better, and in phase 10 we did do better. So what we also supported was the ability to copy and paste sequences of script commands into the debug console. So these scripts, we call them scripts, but they're really configuration files, are generated and authored by our designers or programmers, in a non-technical, it looks JSON-y and it looks technical, but really it's not that complex. So it is designed for like our product managers to use who are non-technical people. So we give them this, access to this the scripting environment, and then they author this, and then it gets emailed to the demo device. Right, the demoer then just copies different segments of these scripts into the debug console and executes them to be able to pull up the moment in the game that they want to pull up. This is also a great thing for if you're demoing, like if you're running a booth and you have like 15 devices that you're trying to pre-configure and set up, right? So from a fresh install, you can just copy a bunch of these scripts directly into from your copy and paste, and run them each on the device, and it will just configure each game to the state that you want or the state that you need to demo the stuff. Cool. Next slide. Whoop, did I push ahead? Sorry. Nope. Sorry. Okay. So I think we can still do better. In phase 10, we have a live operations capability. Our product our product team creates custom scenarios that are authored using our web-based dashboard infrastructure. Once authored, this content is pushed remotely to the client, and they control the various states in the game. So through the system, the game can be completely reconfigured. We can use it to repopulate the UI, change the UI workflow or flow, unlock durables or consumables to the player, and just do any sort of manipulation we need to get the build in a specific state. So again, as I mentioned, this interface in JSON, it looks kind of intimidating, but I assure you that our non-technical people are using this solution to populate and build custom events in the game. So here's an example of this thing in action, right? So our product manager in this case has created a weekend event where Granny pops up, she comes up and she challenges the player to a one-on-one match. And again, this is all done through our live operations tools, without the need to push new builds to the client. So when the player plays a specific level that or world that Granny has been spawned into, they'll get a specific reward at the end of that, and Granny will come back up again using the scripted system to tell the player that she'll be back. Cool. So using the same system, we can craft specific tailor-made demos and walkthroughs, in your real time, to generate these demos and custom experiences, right? So in this case, right, like we build something specific for our maybe brand partner demo where we can speak to them and really rearrange the feature of the game to highlight those features. Again, this system also allows us to really induce state change that again surfaces the buried content that exists within the product. Okay, so to sum it up. The ability to randomize or to random access any moment in the game really empowers presenters to give more relevant and contextual demos, right? That really works well in the use case of if you're again, like presenting a build to a partner, right? This is less consumer level stuff, right? It really allows the demoer to access buried content very easily and demonstrate this stuff without friction, or without the requirement of building special case code into your client or updating binaries. It also has the benefit of taking the weight off relying on more expensive, processes like building, a custom build for like a demonstration. And generally, this feature is already available in, to some capacity in your products. They're just not targeting that kind of end user or, non-technical user, right? So, most of the stuff, the heavy lifting, if your workflows are, built well, like should exist inside your product already. So, that's it. Questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? None, I gather. Oh, there's one from Nick Chamala. Yes.
Hey, Wes. When you're talking about your demo builds, and I think you sort of mentioned like the differences between doing a custom build and sort of like that scripting kind of midpoint. Did you start by doing custom builds and then move towards the scripting language? And what were some of the lessons you learned from the differences between the two? Like, are there limitations if you don't just do a custom build?
Yeah, we do both, right? Like, sorry. Yeah, good question. We do both. I think the scripted builds are still very important, right? Like in the case of like demoing your game at a trade show, right? You really want like a crafted story that that has a clear takeaway and a call to action for the user, right? You really want to onboard them in a very particular way, and that stuff can't be done in a really kind of surface level scripting environment, right? This is much more for that B2B type of interface where you might be a creative director going down to talk to a partner and demoing, in real time specific features of your product, right? Like, it's much easier if you had an interface to access that stuff, right? Because I'm sure for you, right? Like if you're talking to your partners, it can be very challenging to access this stuff, right? Like especially buried features, and instead of having to go back to your engineering team to go, hey guys, can we sprint to build this functionality to expose these buttons that eventually get stripped out of the build, right? Like it pollutes your build, right? So and you have to incur this in your development process, right? Whereas with this environment, right, like we're using tools that we have, we design the game in a very modular way that enables us to, again, to showcase these features at a very easy, and frictionless manner.
And you're offloading the work from the development team onto a product team, right? So hopefully keeping your sprint on track rather than having to waste time building conference builds.
That's correct, right? Yeah, totally. You're pushing the work downstream, right? Which is the dream of the programmer, right?
The programmer, yeah.
Any other questions? So key takeaways then, I guess we'll repeat here is, plan ahead. There are tons of trade shows, so choose them wisely depending on your your business objectives. Budget, especially if you're sending materials down there, it can get really expensive. And take the time to craft an experience based on who you're going to show it to, and if you're lucky enough to develop your games in such a way, architect them, like use a scripting system so that you can, or some sort of debug menu so that you can actually show specific moments to specific people at any time. You gotta be ready. And access the free money. We're really lucky with a lot of money out there. So you just have to take the time to apply, but there is quite a lot of funding out there. You don't have to pay it back either. So do definitely check those out. And that's it. Thank you to the CMF and to Interactive Ontario.
Thank you so much, Mohammad and Wes, for the great presentation. Thank you to everyone who's here in person and everyone watching online. And again, I'd really like to thank the Canada Media Fund, our presenting partner on this series, and as well RBC, our event partner, and Snowden Studios here for hosting us at their great space. The iON series will continue this fall. We'll be in Hamilton and Kingston, so stay tuned to the Interactive Ontario website and newsletter for info about those sessions. Thank you.